All right, we're live. Hi, Dr. Rob Kiltz and Dr. Jaime Seeman. A pleasure to have you on again and talking about fabulous, fit journey of life. Let's see, make sure I have it right. Dr. Fit and Fabulous. So thank you, Jaime, for joining us and sharing keto, health and wellness as an OBGYN. You have a lot to share and tell us about your keto story and how you got on this journey.
Absolutely. Well, it's so good to be here. Thanks everybody for tuning in morning or afternoon or whatever part of the world you're listening from. My name is Dr. Jaime Seeman. I'm a board certified obstetrician and gynecologist. I had Dr. Kiltz on my podcast a number of weeks ago, which was so amazing. But a little bit about my story. Obviously, I deliver babies, so him and I have a lot of common interests there, but my story is very personal. So just like a lot of women listening, I'm sure, there was life before children. And I was a 3-sport athlete growing up, was super active, but my activity level allowed me to eat really poorly. Grew up kind of on standard American diet in the 1980s. And got to college, was pursuing a degree in nutrition and exercise science, thinking that if I didn't get into medical school, that I wanted to do something kind of in the nutrition and exercise science realm. Thankfully, I met my husband in college and got accepted to medical school. Did a lot of resistance training, obviously, as a collegiate athlete. And so then I went to medical school, and suddenly I had this huge shift in my life where I was going from being super physically active at a very high level to now very sedentary, sitting in a classroom and in the libraries and in the coffee shops, studying and studying and studying and using a lot more brain power than physical power. And my husband wanted to start a family in medical school. So we attempted to get pregnant with our first daughter, and I had come off of birth control. I'd been on birth control for a number of years, and I wasn't cycling. And I definitely fit kind of the phenotype for PCOS. So easy for me to gain muscle, really hard for me to lose weight. Had struggled with a little bit of acne here and there, but I definitely was not ovulating. And so what I had known from my training was that people with PCOS should just lose 10% of their body weight and that will restore ovulation. So I started counting calories. I mean, I was literally counting goldfish crackers. I remember being on a surgical rotation and I was eating iceberg lettuce with like cottage cheese on it. I mean, just thinking back, it sounds insane what I was doing, but I just knew if I lost some weight, I would start ovulating. And my doctor had talked to me about the use of metformin or something like Clomid to get my cycles going, because I was in med school and the timing of when I would get pregnant and have the baby was kind of a big deal logistically. But anyway, after about 9 months, I had lost a little bit of weight just doing, extreme calorie restriction, and we got pregnant. So that was awesome. And
did you lose weight in that calorie restriction, and you sort of espoused the reason that you got pregnant was weight loss?
Yeah, I mean, that's the only thing. I was on metformin at the time, and I had a prescription for Clomid in my hands, but didn't end up having to take it. But what's crazy is that the month that I wasn't cycling, so I was constantly having to take progesterone to induce a cycle. And the month that we ended up getting pregnant, my husband and I joked about it because I said, I'm past my ovulatory window. There's no way. Obviously, most couples kind of know when conception is going to be. And, but then my period didn't come. And so I'm like waiting to start my progesterone again. And, I must have ovulated super late. I mean, it was like a 45-day cycle, but I got pregnant. And literally the only thing I was doing was restricting calories. That's what I was doing, because that's what I thought I was supposed to do. I mean, here I was, the nutrition degree on my way to getting a medical degree. And I'm like, okay, let's just restrict calories and this will happen. And it did, thankfully. But during my first pregnancy, I failed my glucose testing. I come from a long family history of diabetes, but like normal BMI diabetics. You wouldn't know from the outside, just bad genetics. And then we went on to have 2 more pregnancies. So I had 3 daughters, one in medical school, 2 during my residency, but failed glucose testing with all my pregnancies, was diagnosed with hypothyroidism after my first daughter was born. So I was on thyroid replacement through my other 2 pregnancies. And then after my 3rd daughter was born, I was diagnosed with prediabetes.
Wow. Wow.
But if you would have looked, I mean, I've posted pictures on my social media. If anybody would have looked at me from the outside, you never would have known what was going on inside my body. But these were these subtle signs, right? Not ovulating, trouble getting pregnant, failed the glucose testing, hypothyroidism. But I see this in my patients all the time. And I was on a 5 to 10 year path to type 2 diabetes and obesity, and probably a really miserable life as a mom of 3 girls and as a doctor. So in 2015, 2016, I started changing my diet. I started really focusing on whole foods, transitioned into kind of a paleo lifestyle. Then eventually, after feeling like I was kind of the black sheep in the medical world, really adopted a ketogenic diet. And oh my God, I started feeling amazing. It's like the brain cells came back on. My brain was working. I had more energy. I wasn't tired at 8 o'clock at night. All I had heard was how bad the ketogenic diet was, and ketones are pathologic. And so I'm looking at the literature and I'm thinking like, God, this doesn't make sense. Everything I've been taught, it doesn't make sense. Like, it's not just about calories. There has to be something to this, especially with my history of failing on my glucose testing. And then as the weight just started to come off effortlessly, I was feeling better. The lights were turning on in my brain. My husband started eating ketogenic with me. His migraines went away. Family and friends started asking what we're doing. Other doctors started asking what we're doing. So then I decided to start using it in my patients, and I started to see amazing things in my patients. And I went back and finished my fellowship in integrative medicine. And now my approach to my own health and to everyone else's health and the people that I take care of is so much different. I'm off thyroid medication. My hemoglobin A1C is 5.0. I have no evidence of insulin resistance or prediabetes. Every biomarker looks amazing. Now I eat a very, very meat-based kind of carnivore keto type lifestyle. I have experimented at times bringing whole food carbs back in, some sweet potatoes, fruit here and there. I don't have any autoimmune condition. My gut tolerates those things fine, but I eat a lot of meat and a lot of eggs and some organs, but it's a whole nother level of life. That's for sure. That's my story.
and like me, it sounds like you were surprised and you're looking at something that didn't make sense, but you had training in nutrition. And did you learn any of this in your nutritional training, or is it things that you sort of came across unrelated to your nutritional degree and training in school?
Yeah. So I sat through all the classes that registered dietitians sat through. And all I was told was that fat is bad. Fat causes heart disease. Focus on a low fat diet. Focus on plant sterols to reduce your risk. DASH and Mediterranean diet are kind of where it's at. I mean, that's what we were taught, basically. We weren't taught about ketogenic therapy or how ketones work as cellular signaling molecules, or how carbohydrates are actually non-essential for human life, and how important fat is, especially for a woman and for somebody trying to get pregnant, trying to grow a baby. And it's just what you don't know, you don't know. And I think that I went through my training at a time in the world where there was a lot of politics involved, and there still is to this day in 2022, with not only dietary recommendations, but our scientific literature. People know it's very powerful to get a study published, in a prominent journal, and there can be a lot of bias, especially with nutrition research, because a lot of it is, epidemiology studies. I mean, if you were to ask me what I ate 5 years ago on a regular basis, I mean, I now eat a very consistent diet that's a lot of the same things, so I could tell you, but I think a regular person couldn't tell you that. And so it's very difficult with current scientific literature to extrapolate some of those things. And I only knew what I knew at the time. And now I have completely shifted, and I acknowledge that this area of medicine, people sometimes think we're practicing quackery or whatever it is. But it's hard to deny results. It's hard. I have been able to take care of gestational diabetic women over the last 4 years, and none of them have been on insulin. None of them, zero.
So how do your patients accept your conversation? Is it like, wow, they all want to do it? And how do you approach the topic in your practice?
Yeah, well, first we have to figure out what is your underlying metabolic health? Because like I highlighted from the I can look at a patient and I usually have a good sense, like even just looking at their skin, looking at their hair. I mean, there are definitely things that will tip me off to like how healthy or unhealthy this patient is, but we have to do labs.
Maybe mention some of those things. It's a good time to mention the metabolic ill health. I
mean, just aging in general, if I look on the paper and see a patient's biological age, and then, subjectively, I'm looking at them, how old do they look? It's amazing, right? Some people are like, oh my gosh, this woman looks amazing for her age, and a lot of that is genetic. But as we age, especially with our foods we eat, especially industrial seed oils and sugars, these increase the production of something called AGEs, or advanced glycation end products. And these products will really age your skin. They will make you look much older than you really truly are biologically. And so that can be one thing. We also see with insulin resistance and prediabetes, we can see skin tags. We can see something called acanthosis nigricans, which is this darkening of the skin, typically like on the neck folds, kind of in the armpit areas. When I'm doing pelvic exams in the inguinal folds, you can see this change in the skin. Just your hair in general. So hair is actually dead. So this isn't like live living tissue, but sparsity of hair falling out, just the texture of your hair. If you're eating a really low fat diet, that will make your hair really dry and brittle if you're not eating enough protein. So these are all things as we're just kind of looking at a patient that, it might seem kind of funny or judgmental in a way, but that's kind of your doctor's job, is to kind of look for all these little clues and then go digging for what the problem might be. And so we check labs. And so all of my patients on an annual basis, we know what their fasting insulin, their fasting glucose, their A1C, their lipid panel. These are just really basic things. And when we look at the lipid panel, I'm not focusing on LDL, which is what everybody wants to talk about, but I'm looking at the triglyceride to HDL ratio, which is, in my opinion, much more helpful. You want that ratio to be less than 1. And I'm in the midst of writing a book right now, and I'm putting some of my own labs kind of from my journey, from my story. Thankfully, I had labs tested kind of here and there along the way. And at one point, my triglycerides were as high as, like, not awful, but like 160s, 170s, which is a little bit elevated. Currently today, my last panel, my triglycerides were 42. And somebody was like, oh my gosh, that's like incredibly low. And my HDL is like 60 or 70 or 80, somewhere in that range right now. So, but we check labs and we know where things, are. What is your blood pressure? In America, 88% of America has abnormal markers, 5 of them. In particular, those are waist circumference, blood pressure, fasting glucose, HDL, and triglycerides. LDL is not even part of that equation. And so, a message for anybody that's listening is know your numbers. Don't assume that you're healthy. And COVID's kind of made us realize that too, right? They're like, oh, John down the street got severe COVID and was hospitalized. He was so healthy. Really? Do we know that for sure? Because
how do we measure health? It's sort of like we look at someone and we claim they look healthy, but you're saying that there are many other markers deep inside that we should be looking at on a regular basis.
Yeah, because we have to understand that you don't go from being completely healthy to a diabetic with atherosclerosis overnight. This is such a slow, continual process. And with insulin resistance in particular, it's like a 5 to 10 year road to develop, into something like type 2 diabetes. And if you can catch it in those earlier stages, you're going to be able to mitigate your risk, because sometimes once you've been living as a type 2 diabetic for a long time, you've done a lot of damage to your little, blood vessels and arterioles and things like that. And so the earlier you can catch it, the better, but you don't know unless you test. And it is a spectrum, and it's kind of this continuum. And I always think health as a continuum too, because, I've done these amazing things over the last 5 years, and I'm definitely, what I would consider to be thriving and very healthy. But if I go back to doing all the things I used to do, I'm just going to slide, the other way on the continuum. And so you don't ever get to stay there. You have to continually each day keep putting in these basic, simple things into your life that can keep you what I call hard to kill, because we're all going to die. I mean, that's the but I think we'd like to live, a very full life, connecting with other humans and, connecting spiritually. And we've got to take care of ourselves, because it could be quite a miserable life if we didn't.
And your patients, how are they accepting of these dietary changes, which are so radical? And how do you approach that?
Well, there certainly is a lot of confusion. And so I spend a lot of my time, debunking things that they've been told or heard. And at the end of the day, your own belief is what's actually most important. So, I send patients, read and educate yourself and decide what you think is best for you. Because, doctors tell you all the time to do something, and it doesn't mean that it's, right for you. Every patient responds differently. But I do think that I'm seeing a lot more patients now that are kind of opening their eyes and more open-minded about some of these alternative ideas. Because obviously the data shows that we're not getting healthier. When we made recommendations for low-fat diets, the rate of cardiovascular disease and diabetes and cancer practically tripled. But there are some patients that don't want to make changes. And to be honest, they're lazy. There's just some people that don't want help. And I'm probably not the right doctor for them, and that's okay too.
How to inspire them, I think, is part of the question for all of us in medicine, because the difficulty is the opposite approach is so strong and powerful that these approaches that we're talking about, keto and carnivore, are not well accepted, wouldn't you say? Yeah,
no, I completely agree. I became one of the first doctors in the US to become board certified ketogenic nutrition specialist, which I'm definitely not looking to go back and do more schooling and all these types of things. But I think we need, voices that are, there is science behind this. This is not a fad diet. Right. It has come back time after time. Every single decade, it comes back with like a new name and a new title. It keeps coming back for a reason. It's been around for hundreds of years. But the reason it never gets wildly accepted is because it's against the mainstream narrative. And you can lose weight a lot of ways. We've seen a documentary, you can lose weight eating a McDonald's diet, right? But the important part is nutrient density, prevention of chronic diseases, and living as the best human possible. And I think I've seen so many patients do it already. It's quite incredible.
What's your thoughts on keto, carnivore, and pregnancy? How do you approach that with your pregnant patients?
Yeah, that's a great question. So part of it is that it's very hard to study pregnant patients. It's hard to study them because it's not ethical to randomize pregnant patients per se in some sort of treatment class where we don't know what could happen. There are some studies showing that the ketogenic diet might be harmful. They're all rodent studies. And when you look at these studies, the level of ketones is quite high, much higher than a pregnant woman would achieve. But the thing that we are starting to discover about pregnancy is ketones are not pathologic. In pregnancy, we develop this physiologic insulin resistance because the body wants to make sure at all costs, even at cost of the mother, that there's an available fuel source to the baby. Not only glucose, but fatty acids and ketone bodies. And in the third trimester, it's very normal for pregnant women to have ketones in the bloodstream. breastfeeding mothers pass ketones in the breast milk, and ketones are extremely important in myelination of the baby's brain. But when it comes to a dietary approach to pregnancy, keto and carnivore, being in the deepest state of ketosis possible is definitely not the goal. The dietary carbohydrate recommendations that we currently give women say no less than 175 grams of carbohydrates per day, which is quite liberal when we think about usage of carbohydrates in one meal. For instance, my diabetics would go to diabetes education. They were telling them to eat 50 to 60 carbs with each meal, eat 10 to 20 with a snack. I mean, you do the math, that's a lot of carbohydrates. And so what we have to find is we have to find each individual woman's carbohydrate threshold. I have some women that thrive and do great on really low carbs. I have some that are more moderate. Our goal is not only normal blood glucose levels, or what we call euglycemia, but also normal insulin levels. And I've talked about this on a lot of podcasts, is you might have normal glucose levels, but at the cost of what amount of insulin? Because we know even with normal glucose levels, if you have hyperinsulinemia, if you're having to use twice the amount of insulin to keep your glucose levels normal, hyperinsulinemia still increases your risk of things like preeclampsia, large for gestational age babies. It still causes epigenetic changes in your baby that increase your baby's lifetime risk of insulin resistance and diabetes. And so it's not as simple as just, normal glucose levels. We always have to take everything in context. And when you think about a diet that would grow a human baby, even the Institute of Medicine says protein and fat are the only two macronutrients that are essential for human life. And there's essentially no upper limit. So there's been no upper limit of protein and fat consumption that's been found to be harmful. But there's definitely minimums for both of those. There's definitely minimum fat and protein consumption that you need to grow a normal human baby. When it comes to carbohydrates, they're non-essential. So if you eat adequate protein and fat, you could make enough carbohydrate, glucose substrate for a mom and for a baby through a process called gluconeogenesis. Now, does that mean that it should be zero? Like I said, probably not. But the carbohydrates are non-essential. You could grow a human baby with zero. You can grow a healthy human baby with a small amount with each meal too. And so, for any woman listening, the nutrient density of foods that have protein and fat, we're talking beef, liver, oysters, eggs, these types of foods are very nutrient dense. We don't want to eat a lot of excess calories in pregnancy. You really only need about 100, 200, 300 at most in the third trimester. Breastfeeding, maybe 500 or 600. So you actually need more while you're breastfeeding. But you need those nutrients because the body, like I said, it will go take those nutrients from wherever it needs to take them for that baby. And studies show that it can take almost 23 months for a mom to replete her nutrients after a pregnancy. And so it's important that we're getting all of those things in our diet. And unfortunately, foods that are high in carbohydrates are either fortified with those things or they just don't contain the right nutrients. So when you're comparing calories to calories, I would pick protein and fats over carbs all day long.
So we have zero requirement for carbohydrates at any time in human life, including while pregnant. But because of the ancient way we recommend our diet, it's high in plant-based and low in animal fat for sure. We got Anna Osborne asked about one meal a day while pregnant. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't really encourage fasting a lot for pregnancy. I mean, obviously, if fasting was super harmful, humans would not survive. If you've ever seen a first trimester pregnant woman, it can be brutal sometimes with nausea and vomiting associated with first trimester of pregnancy. So one meal a day, I would be very concerned about your ability to get enough nutrients. The usage of amino acids and things like that is probably upwards of like 50 to 60 grams per meal. And the base minimum is 90 grams of protein. And so to protect your lean body mass and things like that, you know, your body goes through build and break, build and break, build and break. So, I mean, I would encourage pregnant women to eat multiple times per day. I think OMAD, or 1 meal a day, is going to put you at risk for inadequate nutrition. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, it's interesting. Gary Fettke has talked about some studies where women fast actually, and I've always seen women, especially the first trimester, with nausea and vomiting. I think it's a protective mechanism potentially to say, don't eat that stuff that might be poisonous for my baby. But I think the difficulty in doing these studies, it made it difficult to answer the questions for sure. What does your typical diet look like in your current keto carnivore habits?
So I typically wake up early in the morning. So I get up 4:30, 5:30 in the morning, and I work out. So I work out completely fasted. I only use salt or electrolytes and water during my workouts. And then I'll typically fast till lunchtime. So I'll head to the hospital, do surgery, and do my morning clinic. And then I'll usually break my fast at lunchtime. And my meals all look very similar. A lot of people would probably think my diet was very boring. But let's see, my current meals I have upstairs, I've got some grass-fed ground beef with some sauerkraut and some mushrooms. I'll usually eat something like that for lunch. And then our dinners usually involve, we eat a lot of steak, ground beef, salmon, eggs. We eat tons of eggs around our house. I will eat an occasional, small salad or a little bit of fruit. It's not on a regular basis. It's just kind of here and there. And it's mostly just either social, or I just want to try something, different texture or something like that. If I was going to have dessert of some kind, I would have, maybe some raspberries with some fresh whipped cream or something along those lines. I eat dairy. I love cheese. But we eat a lot of the same things, and I don't eat bread and pasta and cookies and all those things that I used to eat. I mean, I think now about my diet. It was, yeah.
So you're getting some treats with the fruits and the whipped cream, it sounds like, but it sounds like you're enjoying the food you eat. But you're not sacrificing yourself. That sounds like a critical part.
Yeah, it's really incredible to me. I mean, the weight loss is, I know, because there's every woman out there that's been gaining or losing the same 10 or 20 pounds their whole life. And, physically, the weight management part is awesome. But I will tell you that the reason that I love eating a low carb ketogenic diet is my brain works so much better. When I'm in a state of ketosis, it's like I can smell colors. And for somebody like me that lives this crazy busy lifestyle, I've got 3 children, I've got a busy medical practice, I'm having to deliver babies or do surgery at all hours of the day or night. I've got these other, all my fit and fabulous stuff outside of my medical practice. I would never be able to function eating the diet that I used to eat. I'm able to just work on a completely another level of life. I'm very resilient. I never get sick. I sleep wonderfully. It's just, for me, it's so much more than just weight loss. We know that ketones work as cellular signaling molecules. They're literally anti-aging. They do help with your immunity. So in the world of COVID and viruses and things like that, they're really good at helping your immune system. So there's so many reasons to try it for a period of time and to really adapt your body to using fatty acids again as a fuel source, because many people's bodies have forgotten how to do that.
Mm-hmm. So tell us about your book you're working on. When's it coming out? What's your focus?
Yeah. I haven't talked a lot about it on social media, but it will be out later, hopefully this summer. It's called Hard to Kill. Nice. And it's got a lot about my story. And then it's got basically strategies from a nutritional, movement, sleep, environment perspective. My I have 5 pillars that I talk about a lot in my coaching groups and with my patients. And so the book just goes through those strategies, and it will have an online university associated with it. So once you have kind of gotten the basics from the book, you'll be able to join our online community. And it's just going to help women just like me who just feel kind of stuck, tired, broken, men and women. It's not just for women, but it's going to be incredible. It's been a work in process. It's not easy. I know you've written some books before, and it's a process.
Good things come out of hard things.
Yep.
And I always say if it were anyone can do easy, and hard is really strengthening for each and every one of us. And tell us a little about your exercise regimen and what you practice and how you can maybe inspire those that are looking to get started on some exercise.
Absolutely. So when I was a collegiate athlete, it was a lot of sprinting, a lot of heavy weights, which were great at the time. But as a woman, as a female athlete, there were so many societal pressures to not be strong. It's, perceived as masculine for women to have muscles. And I totally bought a ticket to that message. And I left college and I thought, I'm never going to lift a weight ever again. And I went to medical school, and that was when P90X was kind of a big thing. So I had this little stint of like P90X videos in med school. But then I really just did cardio, and I was totally bought into this idea that you just get on the treadmill or the elliptical or whatever it is, right? Counting calories. And fast forward through my pregnancies. After my second pregnancy, I thought I have to get this weight off. And so I signed up to run a half marathon, and I ran the half marathon, and I beat my, goal for my personal record. And then I signed up for another one the next year. And so I was just running, but it wasn't helping me at all with my body composition. And so in 2018, I finally reconciled with myself, and I was like, you have to start lifting weights again. You have to, because it makes sense. Muscle is a metabolic organ. Like, it's not just this inanimate object, bone and muscle. Muscle is very important. It secretes lots of chemicals and things that are very good for us. And so in 2018, I started doing a lot more resistance training and just some very short bursts of high intensity interval training again. And that's still what I do to this day. And from a body composition standpoint, that has made a world of difference. And for women in particular, because I take care of women who go through menopause, and then all of a sudden they have osteopenia or osteoporosis or sarcopenia. That's a medical term. A lot of people don't realize that's age-related loss of muscle mass. It happens with every decade of our life. And so for women in particular, if you want to fight against metabolic disease over your lifetime, you should eat adequate dietary protein, and you should be doing some sort of resistance training for your bones and for your muscles. And it doesn't have to take a long time, and it doesn't even have to be super heavy weights. You can use things like resistance bands. But I think it's important that women think about that before they become older.
And I'm assuming in your book and your university, you're going to share the how-tos for those women and men that want to get into ketogenic and also a really good exercise plan.
Absolutely. We will. And a lot of people are like, oh, you can't build muscle on a ketogenic diet, but I actually have DEXA scans. I can show you the year that I started resistance training. So from 2018 to 2019, I lost over 26 pounds of body fat and put on 9 pounds of muscle in 365 days. Yeah.
So resistance and a meat-based ketogenic, you call it a low carb, moderate.
Yeah, because I'm so adapted that I can eat. I've tested it before. I could probably eat close to 50 to 70 carbs and still produce ketones. So, my body is a fat burning machine, but for somebody that's like obese, pre-diabetic where I started, they would have to eat probably less than 25. So it just depends what your body composition is and how adapted you are. But it's worth it. I promise.
And what about genetic variability? What are your thoughts on the genetic variability in those patients that are more prone to gain the weight, more difficult to get it off? How do you approach those patients?
I'm a huge fan of being your own expert. Like, it works until it doesn't work. And we all come from a different genetic mold. And I think that there's things that we don't know. I think in the next 10 years, we're going to find out how much the microbiome has an influence on, our metabolic health and those types of things.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to control the controllables. So, your genetics are like a loaded gun, but everything you do day in and day out pulls the trigger. So, you can't blame it on your genes and on your genetics. You have to just do the simple things. Eat whole foods, don't abuse carbohydrates, move your body, create healthy relationships in your life, connect on some spiritual level. These are just the basic, simple things that you can do day in and day out, and you will thrive as a human. I do think that there is individuality in all of this, because even with fasting, we know there's some genes where like people do not feel good fasting. It's
hard.
Be your own expert. Yeah.
And diet is that word that most people run away from. And this is one of the hardest things. And obviously the economics of the dietary weight loss world is humongous. And so, it's most women hear the word diet and they don't want to go that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's one of the biggest challenges for all of us in this field, and talking about keto and carnivore and paleo and exercise and things like that. Are there any particular books you are inspired by that you could share with us that you've learned from, or whether they're keto dietary or there are other areas that you could share with those that are listening today?
Yeah, well, gosh, over the last 5 years, I've consumed a lot of material and books, and there are some really great ones out there. I'm a huge fan of reading books that deal with mindset, because most patients can actually come into my clinic and they can tell me exactly what they're supposed to eat, how they're supposed to move. They're supposed to be getting X amount of hours of sleep per night, but getting humans to do those things seems to be where we fail the most. And so I love reading books on just kind of mindset and mentality and kind of getting out of your own way. I currently teach some leadership courses with the retired Navy SEAL Tom Shea. He's got 2 books called Unbreakable and 3 Simple Things. And those have really changed my life a lot. From a kind of keto low carb world, because I play in the pregnancy space, there's a wonderful book called Real Food for Pregnancy by Lily Nichols. Does a great job of kind of, spelling out the diet. I know you and Maria have one too, which is so incredible, because there's not a lot of material in that space, and a lot of people's doctors don't have good answers for them.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's so hard. But people like yourself and so many others, and just sharing this with our patients for one, and then beyond that, tell us about Fit and Fabulous and how you're seeing the community listening and learning. Can you tell us a little bit about how that has sort of grown, Dr. Fit and Fabulous, right?
Yeah. So people always ask where it came from, and it was born one night on my couch at 8 p.m. I literally only started this brand to provide some accountability, with my own story to the world, that I'm as human as my patients. Just because I have a nutrition degree and a medical degree, I had no idea what I was doing. I was living with these preventable conditions. So I really started this brand just as kind of I'm taking off my white coat. I'm just like you guys. And it's grown into this like big, amazing thing, which is so awesome. And every single day I get messages from both men and women. And they're like, gosh, I'm just really inspired by what you and your husband are doing. And we're just trying to show people, we have a lot of reasons to have excuses. And we don't have them. We just, we live really authentically. Like, this is what we eat. This is how we move. I'm trying to show my 3 daughters, not only how to take care of their bodies, but just as a woman, going through times in my life where we constantly tell women to like be smaller versions of themselves, be quiet. You're not allowed to like be strong and smart. You're not, it's like we live in these like confines, and you can do anything you want if you're willing to put the work in, to do that. And so I love my followers. I spend a lot of time outside of my normal day job doing lives and working on a book. But it's so fulfilling because I'm able to reach people all over the world. I can only see so many patients in a day in my clinic. But to get messages and emails from people in all these different continents, it's incredible how many lives we can really touch.
So inspiration. I think one of the things in medicine, we sort of learned that doctors are here and patients are here. But I think in the paradigm what we're sharing is that we're all the same. We all have something of value to share with people. And we need to step out of our comfort zones and be willing to put it out there. So I really commend you for what you're doing.
Well, I think it's incredible what we learn from our patients. I think there's so many doctors out there that are kind of living in the mindset of like, I'm the authoritarian, I have this degree, like this is what everybody should do. I learn every day from my patients, and it's incredible what they teach us.
Yeah, we have to step down from that pedestal, which I think should be blown up completely, to recognize we're just learning some thoughts on health and wellness, and as you said, learning from what our patients are doing or not doing. But I can tell you this world of keto and paleo and carnivore and mindfulness and being productive in life is just so inspiring that we're seeing our patients. They inspire us as you inspire so many out there in so many amazing ways. So you got the book, and do you have any other goals and ideas in the horizon that you can share with us, how those that are in need can learn?
I have trouble saying no. So dangerous place inside my brain. So Hard to Kill will be coming out this year. I'm teaching some leadership trainings. I'll be speaking at a couple conferences. So I love meeting people and connecting with people. So I'll be out in Santa Barbara in May, speaking at Metabolic Health Summit. And then we have hosted a conference here in my town, Omaha, Nebraska, the last 2 years called Keto Summit. And we will have that back. Maybe we should have you out, Dr. Kiltz. Maybe you need to come to Omaha.
I'd love to come to Nebraska. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's in August.
We'll put it down on my list. My father was born in McCook, Nebraska, so I have some Nebraska roots.
Yeah, my family's from Western Nebraska, actually. My dad was born and raised in Alliance, Nebraska, out by McCook. Oh, wow. Yeah.
Well, we're all related, and you sort of, you're shining the light on the need for us to sort of take and bring this information to the public, because this is all public information. And I know to get into medical school, the costs and the work to get there it's really what you're paying to get the knowledge and then charging for people to get the information. But this world is a game changer, especially in these venues like the summits. But just what we're doing today is that we can share our experience. And mine was so similar that I was suffering. And I found this thing called paleo my patients were getting pregnant on. And then I learned about keto, and then I learned about carnivore. And now for over 10 years, I've been practicing this, and it's a game changer. It's like we found the secret in a way. And how do we keep on sharing it in a way that people will listen and learn and be inspired? I think your stories are really important to keep going.
Yeah. I mean, I think for anybody out there listening, just share with people in your life, because you never, don't minimize what's happened. You will change people's lives by just sharing.
Any experience, I'm sure you have it with your pregnant patients, and miscarriages and prematurity, on any dietary changes, how that may affect them?
So, well, from an infertility perspective, I've been able to get a lot of people pregnant with dietary changes alone, which has been incredible, because some of these patients have been trying for many years. They had failed other treatment modalities. During pregnancy, nutrition plays an important role in reducing your risk of things like preterm birth, preeclampsia, gestational diabetes. I'm very interested, and I don't know who can do the study, but I'm very interested in application of ketogenic therapy at the diagnosis of severe preeclampsia, because there are people that we sometimes are able to keep pregnant for many weeks, you know, in their early gestation. But I'm very fascinated by the possible use of that. It's just not easy to study, like I kind of talked about earlier, pregnant patients. But I'm trying to think of a good example. My patients do so well. I mean, there's certainly always outliers, and there's things that are sometimes out of our control. Pregnancy is such a delicate state of the immune system and, you know, maternal and fetal health. But you just cannot undervalue the role that nutrition plays in pregnancy.
There we go.
You're back.
Well, my camera just turned off. Buy on this anyway, because something's given up here. Later, Jamie.